Hi, and welcome to today's lecture on genre. So you had two readings for today, one from Jasinski and one from Campbell and Jamieson, and I'll sort of weave these in as I go through the main slides on genre. The main thing to know about genre is that it is a type, a category, a kind, or class. It's a label that we give to things so that we can cluster different types of communication together. You probably know genre best from movies, like comic book movies are a particular thing, and we understand that either Marvel or DC, maybe some outliers, are going to produce them. There will be superheroes and fantastic costumes, lots of fight scenes, and so on. That's part of what makes the genre of a superhero movie. Similarly, a romantic comedy will have a meet cute where the couple encounters one another for the first time, then some sort of obstacle. Both the male and female ingenue, usually these are heteronormative movies, will have a best friend who tells them that they can or can't date the person that they want to date. The couple overcomes the obstacle, hurt feelings are healed, and they end usually with a wedding. That's what a rom-com is. This is the DNA that makes that kind or category of thing. So a genre is a category of thing. Usually, in this case, or at least in this class, we're worried about different kinds of artistic expression or communication. There are also genres of speeches, and this has to do with the type of situation in which a speaker finds themselves. So there are different things about the style, structure, or organization, kind of argument that people make, and, of course, where the person finds themselves, what kind of constraints they have, that will help dictate which genre the speaker uses. Another way to consider genre is Wittgenstein's family resemblances. This is something Jasinski talks about in his encyclopedia entry. So a family resemblance is just the idea that these are things that all kind of look alike, even though they happen at different moments in history and different speakers give these addresses. The purpose of understanding what something's genre is in part to help make comparison easier, so this is a tool for critics. It makes our judgment of the quality of the content easier, because if you look at something and you're not sure what it's supposed to be, it's harder to say whether it achieved its goal or not. But if you know more or less what it's supposed to be, it's easier to say that it either hits or misses the target. It can also help us understand why audiences react the way that they do. So if something strikes us as going against what the genre should do, sometimes it's dissatisfying for us in the audience. Sometimes if we're watching a romantic comedy or a horror movie, if things don't end up the right way for the genre, we're kind of grumpy about it as an audience because there's an itch that needed to be scratched by the kind of thing that we were pursuing. Genre also helps us identify comparable situations moving forward into the future. So if you know that a particular kind of speech is appropriate at graduation and you're tasked with giving a graduation speech, then you can kind of look at the past and figure out what you need to do next time around. I want to point out something that I think is fun about genre and parody or spoofs, and this is the idea that parodies are often an attempt to use the rules of a genre and to fill in the serious rules with silly content. So one really old example of this is from a sophist named Gorgias, and he wrote an ode or an encomium to a really unpopular historical figure, Helen of Troy. So he was using a serious convention, an ode, or a speech in which you praise someone, and then he filled it in with what would have been a great inside joke for people in Athens. This also works with more recent things like Weird Al actually using the exact same music from an existing artist and filling in the lyrics in a comical way, or Sesame Street talking about sharing things using the conventions of the sci-fi, drama, horror, movie, coming-of-age Netflix series Stranger Things and calling it Sharing Things. So sometimes the parody will directly take everything except the words and flip those in, and sometimes the parody will just use the fact that audiences know a genre's conventions quite well and then substitute in funny content. The Onion does this quite masterfully with the generic constraints of newspaper headlines. For example, we have here, career spider, not sure she's ready for 3,000 children at this point. That's not a story that would ever happen. We don't write stories from the first person perspective of spiders, but for a lark, they decided to fill in something like a spider is a career woman. Over on the left, you can see man feels like he gets the gist of enlightenment after first few minutes of hearing Zen monk talk. So again, this is trivial news. No one would ever write about it, but it's using the conventions of journalism styles and formatting in order to parody and make a joke. So parody is a good way to identify what the rules of a genre are. And this is also Cabin in the Woods. You can see there's a link that I've posted at the bottom to an NPR article that talks about this as an exorcism on the horror genre. So if you've ever seen the horror parody Cabin in the Woods, then this is also a fun way of playing with the genre conventions of horror as a movie category. And there's Weird Al doing Like a Surgeon, imitating Madonna's Like a Virgin. So that's the fun part of genre, and here's a little bit more of the serious content, going back 2.5 millennia to Aristotle and the 3 speaking categories that he identified. These were political or deliberative, judicial or forensic, and ceremonial or epideictic. Don't worry, I'm going to explain this. So Jasinski breaks down Aristotle's writing into a table, and I've adapted the table a little bit here. Lots of different people who've read Aristotle have made similar tables like this, so if you go on Google, you can find others that are a little bit different in terms of how they're formatted, but all go back to Aristotle and his book on rhetoric to identify this. So the deliberative category, that's the first one, that is the political form of speaking in which politicians speak to other politicians or to people who have the ability to vote, talking about the future and which public policies are appropriate in that setting, whether it's expedient or quick and efficient, and prudent or appropriate to make a certain plan of action. So deliberative speaking is an attempt to persuade others to pursue a particular plan of action, like voting in a particular way. A lot of the campaign address that we see in current events is deliberative speaking because people are trying to persuade us to do a particular thing, which is vote for that person. Then there's the forensic category, and this is for courtrooms. So this is courtroom speaking. In ancient Greece, people like to sue each other a lot, so forensic speaking would be talking about whether this person or that person was guilty of doing a particular task, and the people involved in this all would have been part of the courtroom drama. Finally, there's the epideictic category of speaking, where an entertainer is going to be talking to spectators, usually defining some entity, a person, an event, as good or bad, in an attempt to entertain people and perhaps adjust the way that people have feelings towards a particular event or person. So this is a discussion of cultural norms and feelings, and it is not about a particular plan of action. So here's the speaker's block in Athens. Here's a Roman, it's not a Roman painting, but it's a painting that imagines what the Roman assembly would have looked like. Another version of the assembly. Here's the agora. So this is the public space in which ceremonial addresses might have taken place in ancient Greece. And then just a painting of a courtroom. So you don't need to know the whole table, but there are some broad contours of this kind of division or these categories that I think it's useful for you to know as a student of rhetoric. So for the political or deliberative genre, this happens in political forums, and it's the place in which people decide the future course of action. So everyone who is able to voice their opinion in politics or to vote is part of the relevant audience for political or deliberative speaking. Here we have the judicial or forensic genre, and this traditionally happened in courtrooms. Usually in ancient Athens, this would have been disputes between private individuals, and we're worried about what happened in the past and proving innocence or guilt. Then finally, we have the ceremonial genre, also called epideictic, and this is labeling things, making people feel differently, acknowledging an event or a rite of passage. So this, in ancient Greece, happened in entertainment venues, one of which could have been the agora or public square. And this has to do with how people feel, so it's the present mood of the audience, which the speaker may be trying to adjust, either for pleasure or perhaps to help people process grief. Some people today, for instance, public speaking textbook author Joshua Gunn says, listen, most of the public speaking we have today is epideictic, it's ceremonial. That's what people really spend their time doing and preparing for. And I think you'll find that that's true. We have politicians who seek to change the way that we vote or who address Senate and the Congress and so on to make particular policy changes. But aside from those very limited occasions, the speaking you and I do tends to be ceremonial, like weddings, funerals, and commencements. So in contemporary political address, we have a number of different genres, and I'm going to pause here and start a new video because I can see time's running a little bit short.